Hi, welcome back to the Art of Business English. It's Andrew Ambrosius here again for another podcast. So today I was looking at idioms for negotiating, and I thought I'd prepare something for you guys just to get you started on how you can look at ways to improve your business English by understanding idioms and their context within the negotiation and the different phases of negotiations. Okay, so as many of you know, we spend a lot of time negotiating every day of our lives, and a lot of the time we are negotiating and we don't even realize it. Okay, it's something that's done without our conscious awareness. For example, you can often negotiate with your partner or with your children. So you know, the negotiations that occur in your life are not necessarily ones related to business. However, it's very common that we negotiate every day at work as well. So what I thought, I would just put together a list of some common idioms and ones which we could use. Okay, obviously there are many idioms and expressions that we can learn and use in English. However, what I thought would be a good idea would be to put each of the idioms in the category or the phase of the negotiation. That way, when you are working on the different parts of a negotiation, you'll be aware of which idioms you can use at that different stage. Okay, so at the end of this podcast today, you should have learnt some common idioms for negotiating. You should understand their meanings. I'm going to explain to you their meanings. And as well as that, you should understand which context you should use them in, and when they should be and which stage of the negotiation they should be applied to. Okay? So let's look at the opening stage. When you are negotiating, obviously there are some rituals which we go through. Typically, these rituals are similar or related to meetings, because essentially a negotiation is a meeting. So we should welcome the participants. Okay, we should say hi and welcome everyone. We should introduce our team to the others. Okay, and give some information about the person. So maybe their job title, put them into context to allow it easy to start with some small talk. Okay, we can try and do some small talk, especially if you've got some international guests. So there's some things that you could ask them, like how they're finding their time in your town or village or city. And then obviously after that, we should set the agenda and discuss in a brief summary what it is that we'll be negotiating about. Okay, and then finally in this opening stage, we should state our interests so that we can have a clear idea about what it is that we're trying to achieve, okay, at the end of that, or as a result of that negotiation. So what are some things that we can say at the small talk phase? Well, for example, it depends if you're going to be speaking formally or informally with someone. Okay, for example, if it's quite informal, you could say to someone, "How's tricks?" Okay, that's a very informal expression, and basically it means, "How are you going? How are things going?" Okay, again, it would depend if you're trying to be formal or informal. Make the person comfortable depending on the situation. Obviously, our objective is to make someone feel comfortable. If you're like me and you're not feeling very well, you might have a cold, you could use the expression, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit under the weather." Okay, if you're feeling under the weather, then you are feeling sick. Okay, you could be the opposite. You could be on top of the world. Okay, maybe that's a bit extreme, but if you're feeling on top of the world, you're feeling very excited and good, and maybe like you can achieve anything. Now, if you are being polite and are negotiating with someone that you already know, you could use the expression to ask someone over. For example, "Hey, why don't you come over and bring the wife or your husband and the kids over, and we'll have lunch or dinner at my place." Okay, you could informally invite someone. Say, "Why don't you drop in and we'll have a coffee?" Okay, to drop in is to visit unexpectedly. "And why don't we meet up sometime next week?" So to meet up is to arrange to meet with someone. So these are some relaxed, fairly informal expressions that we could use to generate some small talk at the beginning of a negotiation. Okay. Now, at the stage where we want to set the agenda, someone could use expressions like this to start the actual discussion phase. So you could ask someone, who would like to get the ball rolling? Okay, so to get the ball rolling means to get started. Again, you could ask someone, let's kick off, or you could say, who wants to kick off? Okay, and to kick off, it comes from football. To kick off is to begin a match. Okay, so often we'll ask someone, what time is kick-off? Meaning, what time does the football match start? So to kick off means to begin. To go over the agenda. So to go over the agenda means to review the agenda. So to go over something is to review it. Okay, so we use it a lot, to go over something. Okay, and then to wrap things up. To wrap things up means to finish. So we could state like, I hope to have the meeting finished, or I hope to have the meeting wrapped up by 3 p.m. Okay, so this expression means to finish. And then moving on to the last part of the opening of a negotiation, we could look at stating interests. So the first expression could be to be looking to. For example, our company is looking to diversify. If you're looking to do something, it means you have it as an objective, okay? It's a goal you have in mind. Okay, to take into consideration. To take something into consideration means to consider doing it, okay? An important thing to take into consideration is the need for Okay, so we can take things into consideration when we are stating our interests. And finally, we can be keen to do something. To be keen to do something means that you are very willing. You have a lot of desire. You have a strong desire to do something. For example, our company is keen to work with new talent. So the objective or the aim or the desire of the company is to work with new talent. So in the second part of the negotiation, it's where we make proposals. So once we have done our small talk and set the agenda and then stated our opening interests, we can move on to what maybe we could call the body of the negotiation. The body is where we start to make proposals and counter proposals. Okay, so here we need to start to offer to the other party our proposals and let them react, or wait for the other party to offer us their proposals and react to them. Okay, here we need to be very diplomatic. Okay, it's very important that we use formal diplomatic language. Okay, so we don't want to speak directly and say, I don't like it. Okay, we say, I'm afraid that option for us is not very feasible. Okay, if we say something like that, it sounds much less direct and more formal. Okay, so what are some idioms we can use at this stage? For example, we could say to have a tight budget, okay, meaning we have a limited amount of money to spend. So I know you're on a tight budget, so I will offer you my lowest price. Okay, so if you offer someone a low price because they are on a tight budget. Okay, to squeeze someone on cost. Okay, to squeeze someone means to apply pressure. Okay, so if we want to squeeze someone on cost or price, it means that we're going to pressure them on the amount of the product or service. So we're going to pressure them on price or cost. So, for example, the buyer really squeezed me on a price per unit. Okay. Now, we can provide someone with a quote. So to provide someone with something means to give someone a cost estimate. Okay, so to provide someone with a quote is to give them a cost estimate. So, for example, before we proceed, we will need an official quote. Okay, meaning, can you please provide us with an official quote before we proceed? Okay, and during this phase, we may have some bones of contention. So, what is a bone of contention? Basically, it's an unresolved problem. So there is still the bone of contention regarding delivery times. So if we have a bone of contention, it means we still have some points within the negotiation that need to be resolved. All right, to push it, okay? To be overly insistent or forward. So if we push it too much, maybe the negotiation will fail because we're being too pushy, okay? So to push it is to be overly insistent or forward. If someone is being pushy, then maybe we can draw the line. Okay, so to draw the line is to set a limit and not pass that line. Okay, so if you say, I'm going to draw the line at that, meaning I will not go any further. To have something in mind. For example, what do you have in mind? Meaning, what are you thinking about? What ideas do you have? Okay, so to have in mind. We can also use to be afraid. Now, we need to remember that to be afraid does not mean fear. It doesn't mean that you're scared of something, okay? We use I'm afraid, I am afraid, or so it's with the verb to be. We use I'm afraid, meaning I'm sorry, okay? So I'm afraid I can't accept those conditions. It's a polite way of saying I'm sorry, but I cannot accept those conditions. To lead to a successful outcome. Now, this means to reach a positive conclusion. So if we lead to a successful outcome, then the negotiation has run its path and the outcome has been successful. To have some reservations about something. If during this stage you're not sure or you have some concerns, you could say, I have some reservations about your last point. Okay, so having some reservations means you have some concerns or doubts or really maybe something against the last point that was mentioned. And finally, maybe at this stage, we need to give ground. Okay, so give ground is that when someone's making proposals and you're making counter proposals, maybe you need to give some ground, meaning retreat, take a step back. If you give some ground, maybe this will help the negotiation. Okay, so for example, let's give some ground and see if they will meet us halfway. Okay, so that is how we can use some of these idioms at the making proposals stage of the negotiation. And let's move now on to the last stage, which is the reaching agreement stage. Okay, at the reaching agreement stage, we need to try and use our persuasive and bargaining skills, okay? We really need to listen carefully, okay, to what's being offered. And it's very important that we always check and clarify with the other person what they have offered, okay? Because it's very important that when we do reach agreement, we are completely certain and sure of what has been agreed, okay? Any ambiguity at this stage could lead to problems later. Okay, when we are bargaining, we do use the conditionals, okay? In English, there is the zero, first, second, and third conditional, okay? So these are the four main conditionals. And then there are obviously mixed conditionals. The explanation of all of these conditionals is not really in the scope of this podcast. However, it's very common for us to use the first and second conditional in negotiations. On the Art of Business English website, we do have a post about about idioms in negotiations, and you can read up further, and there is the grammar notes on the if, first and second conditionals. So let's just finish up then. When we're reaching agreement, we can use a number of idioms, and the first one is to close a deal, okay? So to close a deal is to formally conclude the bargaining process, okay? So to close a deal means that the deal has reached a successful conclusion, okay? To come to an agreement, okay? We use the verb to come. So to come to an agreement means to reach an agreement, okay? We have the expression also, a gentleman's agreement, okay? So a gentleman's agreement is a legally non-binding agreement that is guaranteed only by a verbal or mutually understood agreement. So when we agree to something in principle with someone, and maybe we haven't signed the formal documents, we can have a gentleman's agreement in the beginning. Basically, this means that all of the things we spoke about, okay, and agreed on verbally are binded but not legally. There's no, meaning someone technically could go back on what they said. However, it's very poor form to break a gentleman's agreement, okay? Now, to reach an accord is to agree, okay? So, for example, despite our differences, we reached an accord. An agreement in principle. This is very common because often in negotiations, not all points are agreed upon. So, an agreement in principle is one in which the general terms and or conditions of a deal are accepted, okay, but without the complete details having been specified, okay? So, in business, an agreement in principle is very common. And finally, the expression, I couldn't agree more, okay? This is complete or total agreement. This is the great, fantastic outcome. If you can get someone to say, I couldn't agree more, then your negotiation has been successful. So basically, that is a quick overview, okay, of idiomatic expressions at different phases of the negotiation, okay? Obviously, there are a lot more, but today I just wanted to give you a little insight into some that we can use, okay? And get you started. So remember, with idioms, it is learning them within their context. It is putting them into the correct context and using them at the right place, okay? So the most important or the easiest way to do this is to think of them in terms of categories, okay? So if you're doing negotiations, then you should look for negotiation idioms. If you're doing having a meeting about a specific topic, then look for negotiations idioms based on that specific topic. That's the easiest way to learn idioms, okay? Remember, we do have another podcast on idioms, so check it out, okay? I'll put it in the show notes. So that's all we have time for today, but thanks again for listening, and keep learning and enjoying your business English. As always, if you have any questions, then don't hesitate to come over to the Facebook group of The Art of Business English, and we'll be more than happy to give you some advice. So take care now. Bye for now.